No,
and then
completely
we'll go.
fine.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody is having a beautiful day. I hope that the world is treating you like you want to be treated. And if it's not, well, I hope you understand that there's a test involved and that's just the way it is. You'll find a way to make the best of it. And last night, I was talking to a gentleman in Egypt. Today, I'm talking to a gentleman over here in Lithuania. We're talking about psychedelics. We're talking about the way in which the world is changing. We're talking about journeys, and we're going to cover a lot of ground. But let me just go ahead and introduce the incredible Vladislav Andreev, fellow voyager of mind and spirit to our sanctuary of exploration and enlightenment. And it's a great honor and a distinct honor to be welcoming Vladislav, a visionary partner at FANATIC, whose journey through the realms of business strategy and sustainability has been nothing short of awe-inspiring. With over 2 decades of wisdom gleaned from the intricate dance of marketing, sales, and negotiation, Vladislav has been a guiding light for companies seeking not only profit, but also purpose. Through his mastery in developing and implementing brand strategies, he has woven a tapestry of success for diverse clients, from industry giants like P&G and ABInbev to innovative disruptors like Yandex and Buyln. Yet Vladislav's brilliance extends far beyond the boardroom. As the founder of One Species, he champions sustainability and excellence, reminding us of our sacred duty to nurture and preserve our planet. And in the realm of consciousness exploration, he leads the charge with An Entheogenic Renaissance, a bilingual platform dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of entheogens and their profound healing potential. Vladislav, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, man. I'm so excited. And after you saying all those nice words about me, I don't know how to behave. I mean, I melted pretty much. I've never heard anything like that somebody talk about me. So, yeah, I'm extremely excited to have this conversation. Thank you for bringing me here.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine. Maybe give people a little bit of a background. So you and I are complete opposite sides of the world over here. Maybe you could speak to a little bit about where you're at, how you got there, and any kind of background you want to fill in.
Sure, happy to. So I'm Russian born, and as I say, I was born in the crossroad, pretty much between Europe and Asia, in a city that is known for literally ending Russian monarchy. It's called Yekaterinburg, and next to it there is a border that literally separates Europe and Asia. So I know like both of the worlds, and I've been living there at the outskirts of this industrial city for the majority of my life, and then I moved to Moscow. I worked in the corporate sector throughout my entire life, and my first foreign trip was at 19 years old when I went to US for work and travel. It was in Maine, and I was amazed. I was blown away for months of summertime that literally changed my life, and ever since I've never been the same again. And after that, yeah, I mean, in 2021, I went to private, like entrepreneurial direction, let's put it this way. And the war started in 2022, and actually changed again everything that I knew. But yeah, there was an interesting moment, I guess. Can I like share for like another couple of minutes?
Yeah, dude, as long as you want, man. This is fascinating. Please.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
tell me to shut up from time to
not
time,
at all,
because
man.
my thoughts, they jump for here
I
and
want to hear
there.
it.
I think it's like what they call nowadays like neurodivergent, but whenever you
Guaranteed.
feel that I'm losing track, let's just steer back. But anyway, so it was January 2022, and me and my wife, we bought tickets for Istanbul. So we've been living in Moscow, and we're together since 6 years ago. So we wanted to spend some time in Istanbul in a nice hotel in the mountains. So we found it, and it was supposed to have a jacuzzi and a fireplace, and we bought tickets for February 22nd, 2022. And on February 26th, so if I remember correctly, we were supposed to come back. So on the 24th of February is the day when the war started, basically. We were supposed to enjoy ourselves at the jacuzzi and the fireplace. And we go from the old part of Istanbul to the new part to pick a car, and we go for breakfast. And a friend of mine recommended a really nice place with the fantastic croissants. So we're ordering breakfast, and a friend of mine writes me a message like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, what happened?" She's like, "Ukraine is no-fly zone." I was like, "What the fuck?" And then immediately, our life just changes entire direction, because I mean, we still take the car. we take the 3 hour drive of doom scrolling, and then it's just doom scrolling in jacuzzi, doom scrolling at the fireplace, and trying to understand like what to do with our life. And then accidentally, a friend of mine, an ex-colleague, reached out and with the help, and then basically on 6th of March. So the war started on February 24th, and 6th of March, I have like 6 days left in my visa in Schengen. And a friend of mine in Lithuania says, there's a program that could try and help you relocate business from Russia. I was like, okay, I'm buying the tickets. And, well, I'm Russian citizen. I don't have any other passport or whatnot. So I arrive on 6th of March to Poland. It's a connection flight to further go to Lithuania. And then, Poland has its, beef with Russia, let's put it this way. So I'm there, and, the customs officer is looking at me, at my passport, and like asking me, like, where are you heading to? I was like, Russia. He's like, do you have tickets? I'm like, no, but I'm going to buy them. It took him like 10 minutes. He called somebody, browsed through my passport. It was intense. But luckily, I had the background in negotiations, so that helped me kind of stay cool. But eventually, he let me, and ever since like March 2022, we're here. We got our dog here relocated from Moscow. We took her from shelter during COVID, and we joke that she's the only family member that has European passport, unlike us. So yeah, we're thinking about marrying her and reconcile with the family. But yeah, other than that, yeah, so the topics of psychedelic, just a quick one here. So I've been familiar with psychedelics since like 21 years ago or so, and they've been like integral part of my life. Every now and then they help me a lot, and they help me heal my own traumas, several of them by myself, and it was like self-learning experience of therapeutic approach, let's put it this way. But then when the war started, I've been drinking a lot, because it's just hard to process, like move all the stuff, like change everything in our life, and took a while to recover. But then last year, a friend of mine told me that there's a TV show you should watch by Netflix, How to Change Your Mind. I was like, okay, let's check it out. It was in May last year, and I watched. It's like, fuck. Finally, you can talk about it out loud. I was like, really? Like, seriously? Is it legal? And then, I started to get into the wormhole, I guess, the rabbit's hole, and eventually quickly realized that there's a psychedelic renaissance happening. I was like, oh my God, I need to catch up. So ever since, pretty much, I started to dig into the topic, started to read medical publications, medical research, articles, listen to webinars, podcasts, and read books and gather as much data as possible. In September, there was this program by University of California, Berkeley, which is called Psychedelics and the Mind. So I went through it in like 3 days, and like, I need more.
Yeah.
And then, it just went on and on. But then at some point, I realized that, the amount of information about psychedelics in Russian in particular is extremely limited. And, surprisingly enough, there are people from Russian background, like Alexander Sasha Shulgin, for instance, child of
Huge.
Russian immigrants. There's another persona who is not widely recognized. Unfortunately, her name was Valentina Gherkin Vasson, spouse of Gordon Wasson. And actually, if it wasn't for her, Gordon wouldn't have went to Mexico in the first place. And the reason being is that, well, she was born in Moscow, by the way. Her parents relocated her after the Russian Revolution. So she came to West, they got married, and then they went to Catskills in US for their honeymoon. And she noticed that there were peculiar mushrooms there that looked really familiar, as if they were the ones that, were growing in Moscow. But Gordon wasn't, that fascinated about mushrooms. He actually kind of either not disgusted by them or like didn't like them, basically. But Valentina at some point came up with a theory that, Slavic people are mycophilic, and like Western or Anglo-Saxon, as she called them, and now as Russian propaganda calls it as well, are mycophobic. So Gordon was mycophobic, whereas she was mycophilic. And, there's a lot about mushrooms in the Slavic cultures in the autumn time especially. But anyway, she was the one convincing him, that we should look into mushrooms and things like that. So she was the first woman to have a psilocybin mushroom trip, and she published an article in Life magazine, if I remember correctly. I may be wrong here, or Newsweek. But anyway, the magic mushrooms I ate. So anyway, the funny thing here, or actually tragic, is that when you go to Wikipedia and you open like Valentino Vassen's page, and you can find that page is in English, which makes sense. It's Wikipedia after all. It is in Spanish. Yeah, again, makes sense because Mexico, Maria Sabina, and the magic mushrooms. It is in Arabic. I don't know why. I mean, like seriously, I have no clue. But the worst thing is that it does not exist in Russian language.
Mm.
And I was like, what the fuck? I should fix that. So I just started to, blog about it. And there's this social network called Telegram. It's kind of similar to WhatsApp, but very different. It's from the Russian entrepreneur who, at some point in time, he just copy pasted Facebook and then, sold it and then created this masterpiece of Messenger. But anyway, it's like a social network, so to speak. So I started there. But then a friend of mine in India convinced me to start a video blog as well. And I was like, hell, why not? So here I am.
It's amazing. I'm glad that you are doing it. Well, maybe we could speak to this idea of, shamanic culture, mycophilic. Is there like a shamanic culture in Russia? Like, I know that there's a lot of history in Europe about mushrooms and, ceremonies and altered states of consciousness. But is there something unique to Russia that maybe people should know about?
Yeah, there are some things, of course. And first and foremost, the word shaman, if you go to the origins, it is Russian root. And there aren't many words in English language that have Russian roots. So like, what was it? Sputnik at some point in time got replaced by satellite, pogrom, and there was another one that I missed. But anyway, shaman is Russian. I don't know, like some of variations of Russian languages, because there are many of them. It's not like only Russian in Russia. There are other like ethnicities who indigenous cultures basically, and their languages that are being pretty much destroyed nowadays. But anyways, so if you go further to the east, of course, there is a shamanic culture. And, there are shamans that live in Altai region, which is pretty much close to Everest and, all the heights and all the mountains there. But generally speaking, on the country's level, they say that, even the president has their own shaman and some other like, healers or whatnot, some mystics here and there, even in the Russian CIA and something like that. But of course, it's like unofficial. I mean, the culture is there, the legacy is there, but it's not like present and visible. But it is quite common to, know a kind of shaman or like a healer or something like that, and they are in the culture. But in the majority of cases, the shamanic, like people and rituals are conducted with the help of Amanita muscaria, to the best of my knowledge, which is not prohibited in Russia, unlike all the other psychedelics and drugs, pretty much. So Russia is like totally on the war on drugs path. Still, I mean, they don't give a shit about the progress. But I don't know if I'll answer your questions. I guess you can find shamans nowadays, but yeah, not that common. Although very popular Russian singer that is being used by the propaganda machine is kind of nickname is Shaman. So I guess they're playing this aspect. Oh yeah, and funny thing, I remember there was this anti-narcotics policy in Russia. I think they've accepted like 4 or 5 years ago. So they're trying to bring people to traditional values, so-called. Okay, so I tried to understand like what are those traditional values. So shamanism is a traditional value of Russian society because shaman, as I said, it comes from Russia and it's part of the culture. But then again, if you go on the Wikipedia page and then look at closely at the description of what shaman does, is that typically that person is using entheogens. So I mean, this is value the culture. Why you're not using it? You should be. But yeah, they're totally prohibited.
It's fascinating to me. When I read a little bit about some of the Russian culture or the Eastern cultures, the Eastern Orthodox, it has like this really rich history with mysticism. And like when I think of mysticism, I think of religious experience. And when I think of that, like that's what happens to me, like on a really deep psychedelic trip, is like there's this connection to something greater than me, which is mystic in a way, or whatever word you want to use to describe it. There is this connection to something bigger than we understand. It's this ineffable. And I think that I'm hopeful that not only will our relationship continue to blossom, but so too will the investigation into Eastern mysticism, particularly Russian in that area. I think it's a really rich area that has a lot of knowledge that in the world of psychedelics, we should become more familiar with, man. What do you think?
Yeah, that's totally true. There's only one problem is with the religion aspect. Is that in
Okay.
the majority of places in Russia, the kind of dominant religion is Russian Orthodox,
Okay.
and in my view, it is probably one of the worst religions thus far because it tells people to suffer and to accept it and do nothing about it. So it has nothing to do with the mystical experience of psychedelics at all. People just go there to, like pray for something that, I don't even understand what. But if we go towards a more ancient direction, so-called, because prior to Orthodox, there were other religions, like the Greeks had their own religion figures, and Russian, of course,
Right.
had own like gods of thunder, for instance, like sun, and their animism.
Yeah.
And one of the oldest idols found on the planet was like 11,000 years old. It was actually next to the city that I was born at. It was found in some swamps. And it's like it's called Shigir idol. So if you Google it, you can find it. I think it's 11,000 years old. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say here is that the religious aspect is there, the mystical aspect is there, but currently it has no place in the society at all because of many reasons. And of course, Soviet Union kind of played its part naturally. But yeah, nowadays it's just too far from reality, which is a shame.
Yeah. It's sometimes I wonder, and I wonder if these wave of psychedelic renaissance that seem to make their way into society, they seem to usher in a transitional phase. Like there's so much change that comes with these times. And just like the last wave of psychedelics, where we saw an explosion of creativity, we saw this outbreak of violence, and just times are changing. And it seems that we are in an echo of that again today. And isn't it interesting that we're beginning to see this new emergence or this re-emergence of the psychedelic experience? I wonder, are those things connected? Do you think it's somehow like entheogens are the planet talking to us and creating change agents?
Man, I do hope so because otherwise, I don't get it. Like seriously, it's about time because humanity is just killing itself, like literally shooting itself in the leg, then in the hand, and at some point, it'll eventually in
Yep.
either heart or head. By like consuming all the fossil fuels and over consuming of everything basically. So entheogens are there to help us realize that. And I did this there was this study done by two Swedish researchers, and I made a post about it on LinkedIn. It's somewhere there under Entheogenic Renaissance. So they created they did a meta study of the kind of connected of correlation between the mystical experience that is people are having when they're consuming high doses of psychedelics and the connectedness with nature and oneness, and as a result more like conscious decisions, environmentally friendly and more sustainable in the long run. And I mean, long story short, for pretty much all people who consume psychedelics, I think it is obvious, right? But then again, when you read it in a nice research publication, you can find it very promising because ideally, if all the people who run big corporations have this therapeutic, like proper therapeutic approach with psychedelics, they could change a lot in terms of how they do like make decisions within their business, like what their business does, whether or not they pollute Mother Nature or create a new product that's gonna be destroying it for just profit and things like this. And I have a strong belief that, once those people are introduced with the therapeutic potential of psychedelics, they're not gonna be making stupid decisions that would be in, their own favor or the shareholders' favor or the short-term gain, and just kill the entire ecosystem pretty much. What was this name? Al Hubbard, if I remember correctly. There was this guy, the second wave of psychedelic emergence. He was a Canadian, I don't know, mobster or something like that. So he was involved with Humphrey Osmond as well at some point in time. So he had these like strange ideas that, once you get all the CEOs on LSD, they will change the world. So I think I kind of share that thinking in a sense, but of course not in that manic way. But then again, with the emergence of psychedelics from a different perspective, like not only healing but also coaching, it gives you a different perspective, because people who are high in the organizations, they're either burnt out, they lost their purpose, they lost the meaning of life and things like this. And once they get introduced to psychedelics, things could change for better.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I agree. I think if Leary was around today, it would be a different conversation, like there'd be a lot more people that were receptive, and I recently went back and I watched the William F. Buckley versus Leary debate. And like, it's just so interesting to see both sides of this really conservative view and then this other view, and to see where we're at today. And I echo your sentiments about the world of business. And, I do think that if we can begin, and maybe it's an age thing, maybe it is, maybe these things are connected. If you look at the drugs on which the boomer generation ran, it's primarily alcohol, which is it's a horrible drug. It's a horrible drug. It just kills your spirit. It kills everything about you. It deadens you to the reality of that you are a part of nature. It's so separating and isolating. And then all of a sudden you have this new wave of entheogens or psychedelics that are like, you have this new perspective. You're like, wait a minute, I'm going to destroy nature. I am nature. That's like punching myself in the face. Like, that's so dumb. Why don't I treat the people that work underneath me as part of me? Like, why don't we work together? Like, and so maybe this next wave, much like a psychedelic trip, each wave gets stronger until you hit the peak. Maybe this wave of psychedelics is this one where we're beginning to be like, oh shit, here it comes. You know what I mean? Like, it's starting to come on pretty strong right now.
Yeah, man, I hear you. That resonates strongly, and I do hope that happens. The only thing that puzzles me is that if you look at the current psychedelic renaissance and everything that is happening, actually, it is pretty much ex-British colonies, right? I mean, I don't know. At some point in time, I had this epiphany. Like, well, US, right? I mean, Canada, Australia, first country in the world to, start psychedelic assisted therapy in the first place. South Africa, not so much, but they're producing. I mean, not India, definitely. They're not that strong. But it's just what I'm saying here is that out of, let's say, other part of the world, like Eastern Hemisphere or Southeast Asia, for instance, there's like totally different sentiment there. Like Federico Duterte from Philippines, like Sri Lanka's struggle and their continuous war on drugs, and all the limitations in India. It's just nothing's happening there, and it looks thus far that it's just only like one big superpower of US and the acolytes of United Kingdom, so to speak, and that's it. And the rest of the world's like, what? What are psychedelics? Never heard of them. Like, let's pray to them. But of course, there are the countries that are like forward thinking, like Portugal, who legalized all drugs. Like, you can consume no problem at all, and they have a decrease in numbers for heroin users like 4 times. That's insane.
Yeah. My hope is that it's a Trojan horse. I think a lot of people in positions of authority have taken the Huxley view of psychedelics as a disassociative, and they can be. Like, they could be the Soma in Brave New World, where people take it and they feel happy about their imprisonment. But I think that's the Trojan horse. I think what's going to happen, and I see it happen in the US, is like you see these, pharmaceutical companies like, listen, let's just give these people their damn soma and let them be happy about this. But all of a sudden you're seeing this rattling the cage of the medical environment, like, let me out of here, and it's escaping out of that medical container, and they can't control it. And I think it's to a point, will get to a point where it escapes the medical container, not only through the cage, but through the people facilitating the medical exploration of it. Like you're seeing, at least in the US, I'm seeing, doctors being questioned like, oh, so you're going to provide psychedelic therapy? Have you ever done psychedelics? And the doctor's like, nope. And it's like, well, why should I listen to you then? And you're seeing maybe someone who's been on the underground without a medical degree, who may have been a veteran, that's worked through their own PTSD, or worked through the death of their child, or worked through their alcoholism. Now, this person on some level is being treated as the expert that the doctor thinks that they should be. Maybe we need both. I get both, but like I'm seeing that sort of escaping the medical container. Like, hey, maybe we don't, maybe these people that we're calling experts and professionals, while they are on some level, maybe this other person who's been a 25-year person who's worked at the bottom of an Amazon company, maybe that's the expert. Maybe that person has some ideas about how to really get through tragedy, but that's what I see. I see it as a Trojan horse on some level. Is that too far out there?
Listen, I think you're onto something here, because I can tell from my own experience. So you've touched several topics that resonated strongly. So first of all is alcohol, and as said, alcohol is the worst drug in the world, and even worse than heroin. And my father was an alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic, and I seen them drinking themselves to death. So at 12, when I was 12, the country went kaput in terms of their economy. 1998, the economy meltdown. So my father lost job, and for the next 5 years, he's been just drinking basically. And I've seen it's awful. And, he died eventually out of a heart attack, if I remember correctly, 6 months after his father died, because as well, he just followed him to the grave. So when I got into the topic of the psychedelics and I started to understand, like, maybe I can get like proper education. So I found like a couple of institutions, so to speak, where they have like either a master's degree or something around the psychedelics or psychedelic therapy or psychedelic coaching. And then I applied there. Of course, they didn't accept me because I don't have any medical background, because I'm not a clinician, because I'm not a psychiatrist.
Right.
So yeah, they didn't let me in, which, kind of makes sense. But I would argue, because, they had this point which says like interventions in behavior. And I am thinking to myself, so for the duration of 3 years, I've been working for British negotiation consultancy and conducting behavioral change workshops. Yep. So of course you can say it's totally different, because I've been telling people how to change their behavior in specific context of negotiation. But I've been doing that for like thousands of hours. Yeah. So technically I'm fit. But, the funny thing is that the rules and the constructs are there that, the limit from entering. And then one moment I have this epiphany is that pretty much, you remember the stone ape theory, right? So, I mean, everything's a social construct pretty much. And then you look at those rules and you think like, so just explain it to me. If there's a person who got a diploma, is that person is like totally qualified or not? And I remember seeing a person on LinkedIn who was like psychiatrist, like clinician and something like that, diploma here, diploma there. And then she says that vaccines are killing people. I'm like, who the fuck gave you diploma? Like, seriously. So what I'm saying here is that I guess the genie is out of the bottle. That's what I said before we start recording. But you're onto something here, because all the clinicians, they may have the knowledge of the therapy and the approach, but if they don't know how psychedelics work, it's just not gonna fly. But there are a lot of shamans and underground like gurus and facilitators. The problem is they're of course not either licensed, but license means shit. Literally nothing. It always depends on the personality, and there's been cases with maps with the scandals here, the scandals there. It doesn't mean that the person who has a diploma is the proper person to conduct either therapy or be ethically, like, I don't know, strong in their commitment to heal other human beings. So what I'm saying here is that I guess is just very important to understand like who is this person to whom you're entrusting your psyche whenever
Yeah.
you are using psychedelics, pretty much.
Yeah, it's such the gray area, and that's one of the big issues that I see in places like Denver or Oregon or Kentucky that's working with Iboga now. It's these places are trying to figure it out, and in doing so, and in trying to figure this out, it shines a giant light on this concept of when the instrument becomes the institutionalized, it
Mm.
begins to lose its edge. You know what I mean by that? Like psychedelics work, we know they do. But when you begin to institutionalize them and build a diploma around them and build all these people around them, like it starts to lose its effectiveness, you know, and it
Mm.
that's I understand the need for safety. I get it. I understand the need to make sure that the people that are applying the therapy have your best interest in mind and they want to be trusted. Like you don't want to have another, Jim Jones or Charles Manson or something like that. But at the same time, at what point in time does the inflow of money become more about creating profit and the institution than it does
Mm.
about the health? And that's not just psychedelics, that's everything. That's one
Yeah.
reason I love psychedelics, because it shows you that. It's like,
Hmm.
hey, look at this whole thing. It's all like that. It's all a construct.
Yeah. It's new knowledge on the same information.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that's on some level, when you look back at the 60s, that's why they were banned. Like
Hmm.
on some level, psychedelics opened your eyes to the idea of this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, I know. I think this is one of the reasons they're prohibited in Russia, because people would recognize quite
Yep.
soon enough that the king is naked. But yeah, I think the problem is that the capitalist society, however you call it, but it has its like ups and downs, or advantages and disadvantages. I guess one of the advantages that increases the level of like quality of life and everything, but the disadvantage is that the pursuit for profit, yeah, actually it harms in the long run. And if you, I don't know if you had stumbled upon a book called "The Emperor Wears No Clothes." I don't remember the author. So the guy, it was like some US guy in the 80s. He created a book that was basically a compilation of all the historical data about weed and the cannabis in the human history from like Encyclopedia Britannica and other factual sources. He puts it all together, and basically he says that hemp got prohibited because DuPont invented nylon from dinosaurs and million-old trees, and then they wanted to make profit. And how do you make profit if everything's made out of hemp? Prohibit hemp. And make profit. So what you're saying is that, of course, it's losing its age, and whenever we're talking about therapy, I really find it hard to imagine to have like a proper like LSD or psilocybin experience within like white walls and the hospital facility. I was like, I think it can like lead to a very tough trip, but of course it's not like this everywhere, but because it is somewhat unregulated, and the genie is out of the bottle. There are cases where I've read an article about like some ketamine clinic in US in the mall, where you just get in, they give you ketamine, and there's nobody in the room, and you're just lying there with the ketamine ingested in your veins and tripping like, what the fuck is this? This is just too much.
The McDonald's of transformation.
Yeah, but that's awful. That's awful. That cause harm, and actually, that can backfire, because people go there, they experience hard emotions, they cannot deal with them, they reopen their trauma, and then they, I don't know, either just commit suicide or do some stupid shit, and then they start to question, like, why did they do this? Oh, they went to a ketamine clinic, like Matthew Perry last year. They went to Switzerland, $150,000 for a ketamine treatment, like seriously. And then he decides to have a ketamine on him all in the pool, at a pool, and just drowns. Like, that's what happens when you don't teach people safety. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, ironically enough, that guy was an alcoholic for a long time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that we're so quick to, and probably out of love, probably out of kindness, we're so quick to blame a substance for someone's departure rather than we are the problems that underlie that symptom, right? Like,
that's
these
totally
are symptoms,
true, man. Absolutely. I cannot agree more. It's like, blaming the guns. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, that's an evil gun. It's an evil one.
Yeah, it kills. But that nobody even tries to address the reality in which people live, the reality, the stigma, the
Right,
taboo that surrounds them. And
right.
whenever you cannot consume, it creates additional problems, it creates
Of course.
additional issues. I mean, if you get hospitalized, you cannot even talk about out loud because it's prohibited, because I mean they're going to arrest you for consuming, and this is ridiculous. So that stigma definitely needs to go for the harm reduction to happen. I guess that's what I'm doing in my podcast.
You
Like,
are definitely.
trying to give the knowledge to people, because even though psychedelics are safe, like extremely safe, people can do stupid shit. And that French student that died in
Yeah.
Amsterdam, and the reason they prohibited psilocybin mushrooms, not like truffles, is just no precaution measures. That dude didn't have a trip sitter, no set and setting, just went on walking around the city and decided to test the gravity, I guess. But still, people do stupid shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I go back and forth, like on some level, you know, especially after like some deep trips, man, where I just, you know, leave this planet on some level, and I'm calling my mom and my sister like 3:30 in the morning, like I'm pretty sure I'm an alien, They're like, shut the fuck up, dude, go to bed. And I'm like, no, you guys don't get it. Like, I'm talking to the aliens right now.
Yeah.
You're an alien too. You don't get it, like. So on some level, I'm like, okay, this can be something that makes people. Maybe obviously it's not for everybody. Maybe it should be
Yeah, for
restricted to
sure.
some people, but who am I to say someone else can't do it? Like when I start going down that road, it does get kind of slippery on some level.
Well, there are some things that we should definitely remember. Like,
Okay.
if a person or their first bloodline relative have schizophrenia or
Yeah.
bipolar disease or predisposition, I would definitely advise them to avoid psychedelics, because they
Why
can.
though? Like, what is there, because of the literature that says that, or like, what is the real evidence behind that?
So technically, there is evidence. I mean, if you look at the data, so the idea there is not that they create schizophrenia or bipolar disease, but
Mm-hmm.
it's that they kind of speed up the processes, basically. So if a person have a predisposition, it may or may not, let's say, convert into full blown
Yeah.
schizophrenia, bipolar disease in the, I don't know, next few years or 10 years or decades. But psychedelics can speed things up if there's no preparation, no set and setting, and it can open a deep trauma, for instance, and people won't be able to deal with it by themselves. So those things are still like cautionary measures, and ideally I wouldn't advise to people with, like, I don't want to call it like weak psyche, but like the problems that are not addressed through therapy, like, I
Yeah.
don't know, traumas, especially, to consume psychedelics by themselves, because they may end up creating problems for themselves. I mean, they can theoretically heal themselves, but without the proper trip sitter, or like a shaman, a guru, or
Yeah.
therapist, or coach, or whomever nearby who can really help and create the container and facilitate the healing process, it may really create additional harm for human psyche. So what I'm saying here,
Yeah.
and I've looked at the data, I try to like address properly like all those claims that psychedelic cause schizophrenia. They don't. They
Right.
speed up the processes. That's it. They're like, there's this phrase, they're meaning enhancers, but they're enhancing. So the enhancing quality is there, and because it is psyche, because it's deep rooted in like subconscious and the genes, it just sparks up a disease pretty much. So that's the thing. So for that reason, I wouldn't advise people with schizophrenia or bipolar disease, or if they have first bloodline relatives, to consume psychedelics.
Yeah.
And probably not if they're on SSRIs and MAO,
Yeah.
antidepressants as well, because some substances can lead to even like fatal combinations. So better to avoid.
Yeah, those are great points. I'm hopeful in the future. Like, I was talking to Alexander Ledbedev, who's out of
Mm.
Norway. Amazing individual. I should.
Russian guy.
Oh, dude, he's epic. I'll introduce you guys. Like, you guys would get along great. He's a
Yeah,
super smart
would
guy,
be
and
delighted to.
he's one of us. He's one of us, and you know, we were talking about what's happening inside the brain during like a really high dose trip. And there's a lot of imagery, there's a lot of feedback, and there's a lot of speculation. I spoke with Brian Roth, who spoke about, you know, all this money that they've done for funding, looking at the 5H2A receptor. But when you really pull the curtain back, we don't know that much, man. We spent millions, maybe billions of dollars, and like
still we know this much.
They're like, it's kind of bullshit, man. Like it kind of makes me laugh in some way. Like, Jesus, we spent how much money? You guys don't know shit. You don't know shit about it, man. You know, and so that's where, like, I come from a family that my dad is bipolar. And I kind of think on some level there has to be boundaries, and I understand a clinical setting for someone who may have some sort of cognitive impairment, but possibly psychedelics could be the answer for that. You know, if you look back to the way psychedelics were used back in the day, it used to be that a professional would take them so they could thoroughly understand what it's like to be in a psychotic state. And I think that there's real juju there, man. I think there's not real juju. I think there's real stuff there that like makes you feel like, oh my God, this is what it's like to be in a state in another reality. And then once you begin to understand that, maybe you could have some empathy for someone who's going through these episodes on some level, right?
Absolutely. And if I remember correctly, prior to Aldous Huxley and Humphrey Osmer nailing the psychedelic in the first place, the substances were called psychotic mimetic, mimicking psychosis. So, of course, there you go. But understanding what it's like to have a full-blown psychosis. And I remember, like, I've had those trips where I felt like I'm losing it. I'm going to be like a mental institution, like, member for the rest of my life. That's it. Bye-bye. I'm not going to come back. And I had those moments. They were fucking scary, I tell you.
Yeah. Can you share one of those moments with us?
Oh, man. It was we went to a festival. I think it was Spongel. It was Spongel in Moscow. Yeah. We went, the three of us, from a different city. And fortunately, we weren't prepared for the weather. So we went there. And, I think it was like either 2CB or something like that, so it was not like LSD or something. We weren't sure. I mean, you cannot test it. You just trust whatever somebody supplies you. And then we went there, and one of the guys, or three of us, he had like kind of seizure pretty much at some point in time, so I had to run for an ambulance and bring the ambulance brigade to him. And then eventually it was all good, but then we had to go to like a hospital or something, and then it started to kick in, and then I lost it. I thought that's it, they're taking me here to just put me in the mental hospital. I'm gonna stay there for the rest of my life. But of course, as with all the trips with psychedelics, it all passes away after some time, and you become normal, or never become normal pretty much, but still kind of.
That's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's important. I think that I know one time for me, I had taken like 18 grams of mushrooms. I'm like, I'm going to go deep. I took this 18-gram dose. And what I've learned on that dose, Adam Tapp and I were talking about this. It seems to me, at least on psilocybin, on these really higher dosages, that there's like a double peak. On some level, there's like a breakthrough, and then things get foggy, and you're like, I can't remember things. But then there's another peak of clarity. And I remember on the second peak, like I just got like so biblical and started thinking like, oh yeah, I get it, and it just made sense to me. Like
now I get it.
Yeah, like and when I look back on it, like there's this clarity, like Jesus is an alien, like all this stuff that was probably in my mind already, but I was in a different world, and I can remember it like, oh my God, it's so clear. This is the truth. Without a doubt, this is the truth. And it was so clear and so pristine. But then when I came back down, I'm like, I was fucking crazy. That's not true, But to see it with so much clarity, it's really something you can look back on and be like, oh my God, how it gives you a different perspective of different mental states and what is possible, and empathy with people, and like it's it's so helpful if you can get through it on some level.
Yeah, man, I totally resonates. I remember having those moments and epiphanies exactly as you
Yeah.
described them. And this is one of the very fascinating qualities of psychedelics is that,
Yes.
I mean, you are on the other part of the world. We've never seen each other before in our entire life. And yet we have this same
Right.
profound experience. And
Right.
this is like insane. And
Yeah.
we're all like part of this bigger noosphere, I guess, the
Yep.
global subconscious or however you call it. But I remember those moments, and I remember I think it was like maybe 18 years ago or so when I had one of those moments, the breakthrough moment that
Yep.
you just described.
Yeah.
And then I realized that, oh, I understand now. Now I get it. And then I had this thought right there, right at that particular moment, is that okay, it is important that I understand right now, but will I remember it tomorrow?
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, typically it evaporates. But integration, as far as I've learned, that it's of course critical and important. And
Yeah. It- regardless if you this is just a theory, and none of this could all be bullshit, but this is just what I think about sometimes. I think that those breakthrough moments and the very difficult part of our trips are the
mm,
manifestation of neuroplasticity in real time. Like that's your brain rewiring itself in real time. That's why you're freaking
yeah.
out. It's like boom, your brain is creating new neural pathways. Like and
Mm,
like even if you don't remember exactly what happened when you were freaking out or when you had that breakthrough clarity, I think that after that event, you've created new pathways that allow creativity or thoughts to flow in a way that they haven't flown before. And that's where the real teaching can begin to come in. Like, hey, you know what? How come, people should be better at math? Not everybody learns the same way. Can we find a way to teach music through math? Like, and that's kind of what was
mm.
happening in the 60s was these new ways of learning. These people were taking, why not? Like, why does it have to be this standardized bubble? Like, what about this other stuff? And like, I think that that's what psychedelics on some level are doing is they're providing new pathways the same way new neural pathways are being connected. Like, what about this way to learn? What about that way to learn? Is that too crazy? What do you think?
I think you're into something here as well, man.
Yes,
It
me
kind of
too.
makes sense. I mean, I haven't thought about it, and to me, it sounds like new idea totally. But then, I'm trying to recollect from the knowledge that I've gathered so far, and it does make sense because when you're in psychedelics, they kind of the patterns of like regular connectivity within the brain and the neural networks that are disrupted and all the new patterns are being created, so hence neuroplasticity. So when all parts of the brains are activated at some point at the same moment, it creates, I think, pretty much like the beginning of a new neural circuit in a sense.
Yeah.
And if you are like concentrating properly enough on like trying to memorize it and kind of calcify it, I guess you can then take it to your regular life with you.
Yeah, at least the residuals of it. You know what I mean? Like
True.
it's like putting these on like a new set of lenses. Oh, like that's a new color. And I've never
Yeah.
noticed that. Maybe it's not, but you've never noticed it before. And then you notice that color everywhere. It's that gives me hope. Like that gives me hope that this first phase of this this I think there's layers to the psychedelic renaissance. And I think that the first layer is getting through our trauma. It's moving through the
Mm.
PTSD. It's moving through these new things. But, if you look close to the edges, you can see this creative cycle or this new movement happening, man. And like, I'm so excited for it. Like just me and you never knowing each other and talking to people on the opposite side, like you said, talking opposite sides of the world, having these experiences, people from everywhere could be listening. We could be influencing people right now that we don't even know of, man.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing.
It is mind blowing. The only thing about the psychedelics is that whenever when we're talking about higher levels of the like Maslow's pyramid of hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, the entire like world is totally different, and I recently came from Sri Lanka and India, and
Mm,
it's totally different lifestyle there. Of course, India is
good
like
point.
number one in terms of population and have a lot of issues there, and of course other countries as well. So psychedelics can help with solving a lot of them, as well as helping treat like multi-generational wounds between cultures. And if I
Ooh,
remember correctly, prior to the escalation of the conflict between Israel and Palestine, there was a study for like use of ayahuasca for both like groups from
Yeah.
Palestine and Israel, and it showed promise because people were willing to let go, all the grudges, all the like trauma from all the generations that were happening there, sitting there and basically driving their behavior, and they were willing to let it go. So in my view, creativity is all nice for US for sure, but the rest of the world is not yet there. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many problems out there. I mean, all the wars, and people make stupid decisions
Yeah.
to kill people. I mean,
Yeah.
I just don't get it. Like seriously, this is like the most valuable,
Yeah.
I don't know, aspect or how you call it, like life. It is the most valuable thing that can ever be. And then people decide to kill each other. And it's like, are you fucking stupid? Like this stupid? Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I don't either. It breaks my heart on some level, and it breaks my heart to think that I'm funding it on some level. Like my money,
Yeah.
my tax-paying money is going right now for murdering children and women. Like me, I'm
Yeah.
responsible for that on some level. And like, dude, it makes me want to cry. I'm like, geez, how do I? What do I do? How do I stop that? And I
Go live in the jungle, I guess, the only answer. On self-sufficiency, solar batteries, like your
Yeah.
own garden.
Even then though, like it's just a cop out. Like maybe having conversations with people, as insignificant as it may be, like maybe it's the conversation of inspiring someone to go within and figure out why they hate something. Maybe that's how this works. It's like you figure out how you become the best version of yourself, and that's how the world changes. That's
Yeah.
I hope. I don't know, but we are at I think we're at a turning point where we got to decide, and everybody has to decide for themselves, which side do you want to be on? You want to be on the side of life? You want to be on the side of death? Like which side are you going to be on, and what are you going to do about it? It could be something as simple as like, you know what? I'm going to tell everybody in my life I love them. That could be it. That could be the thing you do to make the world better, right?
Yeah.
Maybe. Why not, man?
True, I fully agree with you because it's time to change something, and
Yeah.
we should be the ones driving this change.
Yes.
Nobody's gonna do it for us.
Yep.
So unless
Yep.
we take the first step, there's not gonna be a second step even.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, totally, people are messed up.
Yeah, it's crazy. I see it changing. There's a great book called The Fourth Turning, and in that book they talk about the way in which the
Write it down.
generations. Have you heard about that book?
No,
Oh, it's
writing it
great.
down.
I might have a copy I can send you, but it
Oh, that'd
speaks
be
to the idea of
fantastic.
generational cycles.
Okay.
And if you look at like every 100 years, there seems to be this thing we bump up against. The world wars and just the disintegration of the idea of money, or international finance versus national finance. Like these things just come to a loggerheads at some point in time. And so, yeah, I think on some level that we need more people to not only experiment with psychedelics, but experiment with what is possible in their lives. And I don't know what, I think that there's a move towards sort of therapy as a biopsychosocial spiritual model. I know it's a mouthful of words,
That's
but
interesting.
what do you think about that? Is that too crazy?
No, there is something to it for sure. And I think the biggest problem with psychedelics is that it happened like previously in like mid of 20th century, and it's still happening here and there. Is that there are pretty much like two protocols of consumption.
Okay.
So the therapeutic protocol and the recreational protocol, they're all totally different.
Right.
So whenever we're talking about psychedelics, of course, a lot of people are consuming them without the intent to heal their own trauma, right? With an intention to have a good time, to party, to, I don't know, enjoy something, experiment, I guess, and try something new. Or maybe they're cornered, or peer pressure is there, and they're like, oh, okay, you're trying it, why not? I'll do it as well. So other reasons, of course, are there. And the thing about them is that, not all people experience them in like proper way, I'd say, because if you look at like the history of relationships between humans and psychedelics, it was always the ritual consumption. It was not like there you go, mushrooms for all. It's not
Yeah.
like this. Like the Kikion in Greece, like every, like, what was it, like 3 or 4 years they've been
Hmm.
conducting those ceremonies.
Yeah.
And in Latin America and South America as well, it was ritual, and there were shamans, and there were
Yep.
here and there. So whenever we were talking about democratizing access and providing it to all, we definitely need to make sure that people treat them like accordingly, because I mean, you still can get like a worst night of your life, and
Yes.
then never touch psychedelics ever, and think that it's the devil's doing, pretty much, and then tell everybody that they make people crazy and you should prohibit them. But if they do it like in a stupid way, so I guess what you're saying here to me resonates in the fact that we definitely need to teach people about like how to properly use them, because
Hmm.
it's not a kind of coke. I mean, you cannot just occasionally take like 250 micrograms of LSD and hope that it's just gonna pass. I mean, seriously, it's not gonna work that way, right? But yeah, teaching people is important in my view.
You have a unique background in negotiations and language. And obviously, you speak multiple languages.
No,
And
only to just Russian English. I just tried to learn Spanish. It didn't work, unfortunately.
but still, though, you have two lenses through which to see the world. If you speak both English and Russian, it's like you have two different perspectives to conjugate the actions of the world on some level. And I'm curious, like, what do you think that psychedelics have helped your relationship with language?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Never thought about it. I think could be. I mean, hard to say. I never really like put my thinking into it. But in some cases, I guess it made me kind of realize that I understand things without like translating them
Yeah,
properly, because there are both words and phrases in each of the languages that cannot be translated
right.
properly, and then you just understand them, you understand the meaning. But if you like stick to old thinking of I need to translate this and then kind of put it in my like structure of the
Right.
language that I possess, you're then trying to implement some rules that just don't fit.
Yeah.
Whereas psychedelics, I think they create this general acceptance of something new, and give the ability for brain to not try and fit everything within a certain box, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. You know, the reason I ask is that sometimes in a psychedelic journey, it's difficult to bring things back. There's no linguistic pathway to do it. So you bump up against something meaningful that you can't
Hmm.
describe. And that sounds a
True.
lot like what you're talking about. Like, in German, they have Schadenfreude. Like you feel
Hmm.
happy when something bad happens. We don't have that particular term in English, but now that
Right.
you know about it, you can comprehend it. It's sort of it's not exactly there, but it's similar. It's the ineffable is
Hmm.
something meaningful you can't explain, but learning other languages allows you to see the world in different ways. It's
Absolutely.
it's fascinating to think about, right?
That's true, and the fact that there are so many languages out there, this is
Yeah.
like insane, and it's just
Yep.
not possible to learn them all. So, in a sense, I mean, you're lucky. You don't need to learn other languages because the entire world speaks English pretty well. I mean, not all of it, of course, but in the majority of cases. But nowadays, with all the technologies, it's just not a problem. Whenever I see people like my country mates traveling all over the world, not speaking a single word in English and trying to shout in Russian to a foreigner, and trying to understand like why they're not understanding them. They're shouting like loudly, but still they somehow survive, and they use the translation tools and everything. But of course, in my view, it's best to learn the language if possible. Unfortunately, I'm not that capable.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about all the different languages and how we can see the world through those different ways. You're doing some stuff in India too. What maybe you
Hmm.
could speak about some of the projects you have going on down there. It sounds like a pretty awesome one.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So there are like many reasons why I'm related and connected with India. So
Yeah.
first and foremost, 12 years ago was the first time I went to India, and I went to Vipassana meditation, which is a 10-day meditation. Well, theoretized that it was created by Gautama the Buddha. and it was like given in exact instructions from one person to another for the duration of past 2,500 years. So I went there. It was a cultural shock by default, but then surprisingly enough, on my way back, I stopped at some guy's place through couch surfing, and that person became my best friend for life. Like seriously, I literally recently saw him like a week ago. He's got a child, a newborn, and I mean, I'm part of his business pretty much. But because of the war and all the sanctions and everything that happened, all the Western world, let's say, canceled Russians, and being a Russian passport holder nowadays is like a burden pretty much. But India has a different kind of relationship with Russia, and they remember the help that the country provided them in the second part of the 20th century when they've been experiencing like really tough time with food and everything. So when I come to India and they ask where I'm from, I say Russia, they like smile widely and say a couple of words in Russia because they kind of have this warm, nice feeling towards. So we were thinking with my business, apparently nobody was interested to work with us in the Western world because of the sanctions, and my business is strategic marketing consultancy in Russia. And we work with private sector. We don't yet work with government, even though 90% of the economy is government related. But anyway, so Western world was closed for us, and we thought, why not India? And then I came to India again at some point in time. I think it was my 7th visit there. And I think I was like either high or something, probably just weed or hash that we spoke with friends. And then I had this epiphany that, there's this awful thing that was like, came to like my knowledge, is that it's called feminicide, if I remember correctly. So basically, whenever a couple has a child, and whenever they know that the child's sex is female, they make an abortion. Okay.
Wow.
Or if a child is born and she's a girl, they kill her. So to me, it was awful, and I wanted to do something about it, like literally do something about it. So I thought that we could try and use our knowledge and our collective experience to come up with a project that would change lives of women in India for better. So we started to dig further, and we quickly soon realized that in India they've outlawed ultrasound for pregnant women because of like this particular reason, actually.
Mhm.
But we quickly realized that there is another big problem, and it's called menstrual hygiene and the topic of menstruation in the first place, which is a taboo in the majority of societies all over the world, not only India. So women in India suffer a lot. So first of all, the penetration of pads is like 14% on the total market level. But the stigma around the topic is so big that, whenever a woman is menstruating, a father of the household would refuse to use the toilet. And then they have the menstrual huts in some regions where they send women to menstruate there, and then they're being raped
Mhm.
and get impregnated and all the awful consequences. So I started to think like, what can I do about it? I mean, I don't have money, I don't have anything that I can change the world, but I had this thought. Unfortunately, didn't realize, but I'm still working on it. So I came up with a project that would help through education alleviate the stigma. And with my team, with the researchers, the sociologists in my team, we dug deeper, and we realized that what we could do is offer like an approach to do an educational intervention about like basic physiology or health for adolescents of age of 7 to 9. And the reason being is that first of all, there's no period yet, there is no stigma yet, there is no taboo yet, but it also is important to address men in the room, because men are the problem, and it's a patriarchal society as many others. So we thought that we need to teach both women and men, but how to, when they're children, they're more susceptible to new knowledge, basically. So we got the project. I think we need maybe like $15,000 to just start in several schools in India. We counted all. We just don't have money, so we called it Shri Shakti. I call it, it's actually my wife called it. and then spoke to many people, and a lot of people are willing to help, and it's just not moving. But I had this epiphany that if I make it happen within the previous year, and the previous year I was India's like chairing G20. And I thought that, if I somehow get to Narendra Modi, and Narendra Modi is the Prime Minister of India, he's like very widely like supported person in India, and just a lot of Indians are proud, although not all, but still. So anyway, if I get to him and tell him that, look, man, I mean, it's G20, this is the moment when you can really launch this project and show to the entire world that you are leading the change, as Gandhi, promised at some point in time, and indeed empower women. Because if you understand like the deeper roots of problems, is that if women were to have an equal participation in the economy, for India, for instance, they would have like quadrupled their GDP pretty much in 3 years. And this is insane. And people and women used like dirty cloths to cover the blood from the menstruation. This is ridiculous. So here as well, psychedelics could help. Like weed, for instance, has antiseptic qualities, and it alleviates pain, menstrual cramps as well. So for me, it was just it resonated strongly. I wanted to do something, and I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this is that well, I told you about my father. He left family quite young when I was like 12, and my mother, she had like 3 jobs to put me on my knees, my feet, and then at some point I was like maybe 4 or 5 with like extra job here and there, and I owe it all to her. And if it wasn't for women, we wouldn't have all been here in the first place. And I understand the LGBTQ community and such, but like still. So I thought that I could try and change something. Haven't succeeded yet.
I don't know, man. I think just having that epiphany and having the passion to do something, maybe it hasn't succeeded at the level you want it to. But to say it hasn't succeeded, I don't think it's a fair statement, man. The fact that you're here telling me about it, man, you care about it, I think is success in itself. And I'm thankful that you're doing it, man. Thank you for that. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people that maybe check out this podcast could reach out to you. And
that'd be nice. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Just there's one bit to that story. So first of all, everything's on LinkedIn and my profile, and you can find it in my posts is there. And I think you can find a post from May. But this is like mind-blowing thing, man. I think it's like an exclusive here. So if you find a particular post on my LinkedIn feed from May last year, where I announced this particular project, and it's called like FANATIC's project dedicated to women's health. So when you copy the link to this particular post, instead of women, it says FANATIC's project dedicated to activity. Let me just wrap that up a bit.
Yeah.
So the presentation that is attached to that post is called FANATIC's project dedicated to women's health. Okay. So the word women in the link, when you copy the link to that particular post, is being changed because it has word activity instead of women. But the funny thing is that it makes no sense. Word activity has more letters in it than women.
What?
So, I mean, if you can like literally do it right now, and I mean, I can send you the link. Just give me a second. And the thing is that amazes me the most, and I think one of the reasons is that all the algorithms and the AI in general was written by like white men pretty much, and I think they just thought why not, let's just change something here and there, nobody would notice. And then it happened, and I think it led to it was 10 months ago. So can I send it here to the chat?
If you go down to present on the bottom, you should be able to share your screen and we can do it live.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's do it live. I mean, because this is like ridiculous. I mean, I just don't believe it. Let me try and present.
It sounds like maybe it's being filtered through the lens of that country's censors or something like that. Like why would the algorithm do it unless it was something that was?
Am I sharing my screen right now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. So if I click here, so this is the post, right? And it says overview of FANATIC's project dedicated to women, right?
Okay, I can see it right there.
Okay,
Yep.
so what am I doing here? I'm going here and copy link to post.
Okay.
Okay, and then I input it here. Fanatic propagated to activity. Like what the fuck? Like seriously? I mean, like literally, women has 5 letters.
Hmm.
Activity has like what was it, 8? Like how come?
If there was a similar post, is it possible that
No,
maybe
it's not
like
possible.
it's
I mean, this is the name of the company. Like
okay,
seriously.
okay. I don't know. LinkedIn, we're doing this live on LinkedIn. Maybe you guys can help us out, man.
Yeah,
What's going on there? I don't
I
get it.
think, yeah. That person Reed, I think is here, right? It's Reed Hoffman.
Hmm.
This registered investor. He was like the owner or like founder of LinkedIn. Who was he? Like I
Yeah,
tagged
he's the
him,
founder.
board member. He didn't react. Maybe now is the time that he could. Only 3,300 impressions, but
Yeah,
like you've seen it.
yeah. Interesting. It's definitely algorithmic, right? Someone is changing that. I don't know. Is it the algorithm or is it because it's offensive to some men in India? I don't know, man.
But I did it, but I didn't make this. I think I was making this post while I was in Lithuania,
Okay.
so it has nothing to do with India by default.
Ah, it wouldn't
I think it's
surprise me.
universal.
You think it's
It's not.
universal?
I hope. I mean, it's not. I hope so. I think I'm positive because I mean, there's no like other explanation to it. It's just probably somewhere somebody at some point in time, had a bias.
Yeah, there's what I think it's Hanlon's razor that says, "Don't attribute to malice what could be attributed to incompetence."
Yeah, could be as well. I just don't understand the logic behind it because there
Right.
is some, right? It's an algorithm after all. I
Yeah,
mean,
of
there is
course.
certainly it's like either or, like yes, no, and what is the criteria there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So ever
Yeah.
since I noticed that, I'm trying to even further highlight the role of women, and especially in psychedelics area and field as well, because well, I told about Valentina Gerkin, for instance, but there was another lady, and she's not widely known, and actually. There's a nice suggestion that what we could do is
Yeah.
to celebrate a day of a trip sitter. So everybody knows Albert Hoffman, right? I
Hmm.
mean, the father of LSD created it, and blah blah blah. But well, when did he trip? Like the first conscious trip, it was April 19th at
19th.
4:20, right? Like exactly 4:20 because it was logged in his journal. So it's not like a widely known fact, but actually, if you dig deeper and you read the book and you find the evidence, you would see that he wasn't tripping by himself. He had a trip sitter, and that trip sitter's name was Susie Ramstein. Okay, so she was a lab assistant, and she was with him on that day, on riding along on another bicycle to his house, taking care after his high as fuck ass while he was on first ridden acid trip, and taking care of his needs and calling the doctor and calling other people and making sure that he was fine. So she was the first trip sitter on record in the Western world. Moreover, she had her own moment in June. Damn, I forgot. It's also posted on my LinkedIn, Entheogenic Renaissance, about it. Yeah, I found it. So yeah, 12th of June 1943, she was the first woman who had acid trip. Because again, she logged it and she had a nice tram ride. So I actually suggest that if there is a day that is celebrating a trip sitter, it should be June 12th.
I love it, man. The June 12th trip sitter day. It should definitely be that. People should adopt that especially here in Denver or in Oregon or in all these places, man.
And honor women.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. Without a doubt. There's a group, Women in Psychedelics, that I'll put you in touch with them. Like they're super awesome, and they're lawyers, attorneys. Like this should definitely be a holiday.
Just send them my post on the Entheogenic
I will.
Renaissance is there because I think you should do it. I mean, like seriously, with all the legacy, with all the
Yep.
discrimination, with all the like inequality, I mean, still the world is run by white men in the majority of cases, right? So we need to do something about it. Because I think I have this theory, and yeah, oh, I remembered one of the reasons I wanted to do that project in India to change like opportunities or enable women to empower them and change their life in the first place. And is that I had this feeling is that when a woman in power, like say a president or a premier minister or something like that, she wouldn't have started a war.
I would disagree. I think that people at the height of power are
Do
pretty
you
much
know?
psychopaths.
Do you know
Like
any women who started wars?
um well, I don't think it's fair to say that one
There weren't
individual
many
starts a
women
war.
in the
Like I
first
think
place.
true, but I think like I'll use our president for example. Like I don't think it's Joe Biden pulling the strings. I think that there's a group of people that facilitate the decision to go to war. I think putting it on
Hmm.
one person is too simple. Like I don't think that one person decides that.
Could be, but
But
when we're talking about authoritarian regimes,
would you consider companies authoritarian regimes?
it
Because there's
depends.
women CEOs that are complete psychopaths. There's a girl that runs UPS. She's a psychopath. And
Some
it's
companies,
self-selected. I think
true,
power
corrupt.
self-selects psychopaths and it corrupts absolutely. I
It
would love to
does.
believe that women would be better leaders, but I think that the leadership position is on some level like self-select psychopaths. And regardless of what type of generals you have, you're a psychopath if you want to be in that position. Like people who want to be in
Yeah,
power should never be in power, man.
ideally, yeah, that's true. No, that I agree fully. And of course, it's a theory. It's like my
There's a
thinking,
lot of
my
truth
opinion.
behind it, but it's complex, man. Like
It's not black
I
and
don't
white.
know.
I
Yeah,
get it. I get it. It's just generally speaking, women are more like empathetic in the first place than men, and you got to give it to them. It's like I don't know whether it's nature, whether it's society, whether it's culture,
sure.
whether it's evolution, but still. But anyway, still something that we should tackle.
Yeah,
At least on
yeah.
12th of June.
Yes, I agree 100% with that. I think that more women should definitely be celebrated, and that we should be
Susie
definitely.
deserves it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We need all the heroes we can find right now. We need to inspire all of the people. We need to inspire relationships and come
Absolutely.
together to like. I think that's what the psychedelic experience is that like we're all part of this thing, man. And I'm so
Yeah,
tired of all the division. Like
that's
it
true.
bothers me, man. It
That's
bothers
true.
me. Like I
We're all
love my
one
sisters.
species.
Yeah, man. Man.
This is the reason that I created the company and registered one species because I mean we're all one human beings. I
Yes.
mean, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what color of skin? We all came from fucking Africa. Are you idiots? Like, seriously.
Yeah. And I think
What?
that's what the psychedelic trip shows us, man. Like you're part of maybe you didn't come into this world, maybe you came out of it. And I think if
Mm,
people could begin to see that on some level, like you are nature,
yeah.
you know.
Part of it,
We are
you're the cosmos. We're particles,
yeah, yeah,
nothing, just a speck of dust, pretty much,
yeah.
just compiled in the shape of a persona that we perceive through our eyes, and what we perceive is not what reality is because it's just a construct within our brain.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true, man. It's
That's
so
funny.
true. I think it speaks all this conflict speaks to the idea of pain and suffering and the
Hmm.
generational trauma. And maybe that's I don't have a real great answer for that. I know that if I'm honest with myself, I think that I carry a lot of the pain that my parents had and the fear, more importantly, the fears my parents had. And that manifests
Yeah,
itself in ways that are destructive to my relationships. But being aware of that is the first step in fixing it. You know what I
absolutely.
mean? It's tricky.
Yeah,
It's
but
tricky.
there is evidence from neuroscience which basically says that this phrase totally makes sense. So once you realize that there are certain neural circuits that drive your behavior and they start to dissolve. So that's what psychedelics do. They allow you to observe them, and that multi-generational trauma that you mentioned, for me, it is like extremely relatable because I went through that kind of therapeutic model that was created by Cybin. And yeah, I guess, Cybin, they're like producing like alterations of psilocybin molecules. They're like kind of new agey pharmaceutical company, let's put it this way. So they got some therapists who are doing the clinical trials and stuff, and they created their own model. They called it Embark. I don't remember what it stands for like specifically, but I went through it. It's like open source online education for therapists. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I remember there was this woman. She was the black woman talking about multi-generational trauma, about the PTSD. What she called it, like. Damn, I don't remember. It was like really nice, not like traumatic, but like slave disorder, post-traumatic slave disorder, or something like that. So she gave an example of, like two women talking to their children in the same space, and, a white woman, praising her child, saying that he's like the wonderful kid and whatnot. Whereas the black woman would say to her child that, that awful motherfucker is useless completely. And she was saying it's not because she didn't love him. She does, but she says that so because, if she was asked like 200 years ago by the white master about her child, and if she were to say that he is, this brave and strong, he would have been taken from her or sold to somebody. So, it's just being given from generation to generation to generation, and children are being and sitting there and basically getting this new trauma.
Yeah.
So I thought that, in my background, actually, like Russian background and the communist regime and all the wars and all the bankruptcies and everything that happened, I mean, there are so many layers of trauma. I don't even when I realized the depth of like the multi-layeredness of that trauma cake, I quickly realized that it's just not gonna be resolved for like another 100 years because people don't believe in therapy in the majority of cases there, and they don't address those issues. And unless they use psychedelics, it's not gonna happen, because how do you get to multi-generational trauma with just talk therapy? I find it hard to believe, but with psychedelics you can, because you have this contact with, I don't know, either like previous lives or the global subconscious, or the understanding of all those traumas deep rooted in your like genes or somewhere deep in your psyche that you got from your mother's milk or something like that. And the depth of that trauma is enormous, and I don't see that anybody's addressing it anytime soon, unfortunately. So yeah, man, that's awful, but there's promise.
That's brilliant, man. Thank you for sharing that. Like I couldn't agree anymore. And maybe this is why people have bad trips. Imagine just compressing everything that your parents told you for the last 5 generations about how horrible you are, or carrying that trauma of abandonment for 4 generations. And then all of a sudden, in the depth of a psychedelic trip, you realize, oh shit. Like it hits you, man. You freak out a little bit, and you should. That is the emotional release of a generation of trauma manifesting itself through you in an hour. Dude, of course you're going to do something, like you're going to lose it a little bit. You're going to cry, start punching stuff maybe. Like, I get it. But that's the release that people need to free them from the chains of the generations that have told them all these lies, man. Like, and that's called breaking the cycle. People that have been in abusive relationships I've seen men in my life treat the women in my life horrible. And when I had a realization, I went and confronted some of the people in my family, like, you guys see what's happening here? This is unacceptable. Everyone has treated you like shit. Every one of them, and you've enabled it. And they look at me and go, "You're the problem, George." Me? I am. I'm telling you what the problem is. And they're like, "I didn't want to talk to you right now. You're out of your mind, George." And I'm like, "Here's the pattern. Look at it. Tell me why I'm wrong." And they're like, "You're wrong because you're wrong because I said so." And it's like, then the next level is, well, how do you integrate that? Like, you go tell the people you love about this pattern that you have seen disrupt their life and ruin their life, and it's still doing it. And you bring it to them with all the courage, like, fuck, I hate to tell you guys this, but this is what I see. And they're like, no, you are the problem, George. Oh, me? It's then what do you do with it? How do you integrate that? Like, oh my God, people don't even want to be around me now because I pointed something out to them that killed me forever. It's a trip, but here's what I know. One person doing that can be enough to to inspire someone else to do it.
Hmm.
And that's a new chain of reaction. Interrupting that pattern in your life can make sure that it doesn't happen for the next generation. And that is like exponential growth right there. One person can create exponential growth for humanity by interrupting that one pattern in their life, man.
I couldn't agree more, man. And I think there's like, just to build on top of what you said, there's the thing, I always kind of annoy my wife. Don't drink. I mean, this is good, bad for you. Don't smoke and that stuff. But anyway, what I like realized at one point in my life is that unless a person, desires to change something about their life, it is simply pointless to try and convince them to change something, because, as you said, they will tell you that you're the problem. They don't have any problem. They're doing totally fine.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying, it totally makes sense, because instead of like telling people what to do, you're showing them and leading by example, pretty much. And they get inspired. They see, oh, it's possible. So you can quit alcohol, like using psychedelics, or you can get, I don't know, rid of addiction or PTSD or trauma, and you can live a better life. Seriously, huh? But if you tell them, go try psychedelics, they're good for you. They're like, wow, you're drug addict junkie. You're like, what's wrong with you? Because this is like very intricate part, and like I think it's very nuanced. But I really love that you say it, because it resonates strongly.
Alcohol is an interesting one, because if you look at like AA, I think it was Bill Wilson who actually incorporated LSD into the 12-step program.
He tried to. They didn't let him, because it was the substance, and they were against it. They said it compromises the politics of like the charter or whatnot. But he had the belladonna experience that helped him quit alcohol in the first place. It was in 1934. So he went to the clinics in New York to get treated from alcohol use disorder, and they gave him belladonna, and he had this room in the white light, and ever since he never touched alcohol, but it was psychedelic pretty much.
Yeah.
But sorry, you have been interrupting.
No, it's
you
all
were talking
good.
about the alcohol and the dangers of it and the AA.
So it's even to this day, like sometimes when I'll talk to people who have battled addiction, there seems to be two camps. One camp is like, yeah, I'm addicted. I was addicted to alcohol, but now I've taken these psychedelics and I'm no longer addicted to it. But then there's another camp that's like, you can never, ever touch another substance again, but you can still have coffee or smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, right.
Like...
Psychoactive substances, pretty much. But yeah, I think, well, to me, it's probably the first camp, because I haven't had an alcohol since November last year. And thanks. It's not that I went through AA or anything. I just basically did what like I'm supposed to be doing with entheogens, is that I updated my software, so to speak, and told myself that I don't need it any longer, pretty much. So I don't really feel the need to go for a drink at the moment.
Yeah.
Or, when I see people drinking, I have no craving, which is really nice. But just what I wanted to say here is that it requires like self-work, of course, and concentration, and the efforts to put into it, because I remember like having thoughts that probably I should drink, I should quit drinking, but probably should do it sometime, and then just delaying it. But then once it's done, it's definitely better. But I don't really understand all those people from the second camp, though, about the other substances. That it does make sense, as you said. I mean, tobacco, sugar. I mean, like, for instance, in Arabic countries, alcohol is prohibited. It's haram, and you cannot really buy it or consume it. But they consume like tons of sugar, like tons. And I would argue maybe it's even worse. I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting, the relationships we have with things. I know when I was younger, I used to smoke or whatever, and like tobacco's or nicotine is a tough one to kick.
Oh,
but
that's a tough one, that's for sure.
It's tough, man.
I struggle with it from time to time. I mean, either quit and start. I'm like, oh man, I'm not gonna do that. But I'm struggling with it still.
You know what helps is like I grow like a tobacco plant, and like it's called Hopi tobacco. But sometimes I'll just chew those leaves. Like I don't smoke anymore, and I don't dip anymore. But I sometimes I've changed my relationship with tobacco on some level by growing that plant and then just chewing the leaves. Like, I think it changes your relationship to that substance, and in doing
Mm.
so, it changes your relationship with it. Like, it's occasional, like, oh, I'll chew some of that. It feels pretty good every now and then, but
Yeah, but just earlier today, my wife she asked me to roll her cigarette,
yeah,
and I ran out of because in Sri Lanka I bought it back, and then I came
yeah,
back. It's like I'm not smoking,
yeah,
so
yeah,
we
yeah.
went to the store and I rolled her, but I didn't, and I was like, "Whew, that's an achievement."
Yeah, it's
But of course, it requires more work.
yeah, it does. It does. It's interesting. It's I don't know. We as human beings, we addict. Like, that's what
Yeah,
we do on some level. Like, that's what we do. We find something we like and want to do it all the time and do it more. And
the system is faulty. That's for sure.
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Vlad,
yeah.
I love this
Uh,
conversation, man. This is so much fun. I appreciate it,
Yeah,
man.
likewise, man. Thanks for offering this opportunity. It's real pleasure, and I definitely learn from you. And I
Vice
think
versa.
I'll ask like, how do you do it in the background so that I could do it as well, because I want to bring people to like this type of conversations more and more, to have the opportunity to speak with fellow psychonauts from all over the world.
Yeah. Well, for everybody watching, Vlad's got his own YouTube channel, Entheogenic Renaissance, and he does a lot of really cool work on there where he's discussing a lot of cool topics. And if you're listening to this right now, you should definitely. I'll put all his links will be in the show notes. But yeah, I think
Thanks,
that
man.
the world would benefit from you doing some more interviews with people. Like, I love your take on stuff, and I think you're doing a cool job there. But if you can
Thanks.
mix in a few people that would bring more people into the tent, man, I think that you'd
Absolutely.
be doing the world a favor, man. You know what?
Appreciate it.
We'll talk more after this, but yeah, like I'm thankful to get to talk to you, and I'm stoked for your time, man. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you, my friend. It's a real pleasure.
So, but before I let you go, where can people find you? What do you have coming up, and what are you excited about?
Oh, where people can find me? So I think you can find me on Instagram. It's the other Russian. So it's the underscore other underscore Russian, which is easier. Unfortunately, on Twitter it didn't work this way. They have a limitation. That's why on Twitter I'm the other Russ. People may think that I'm a Russian spy and conceal it. What else? But Telegram's in Russian. So yeah, I think like either Insta or Twitter. But LinkedIn is the most used social network by me. And then only recently, when I became a blogger, I started to use other social networks. Before it was just LinkedIn. LinkedIn is more professional. But
Yeah.
what were other questions? Sorry, I'm just a bit sleepy
So
here.
that's all right. It's late over there, man.
Yeah, it's 11 p.m.
Um, so the first one was, where can people find you? The second
Right.
one is, what do you have coming up? And the third one is, what are you excited about?
Coming up, who like what like ideas or
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you got the YouTube channel coming up.
yeah.
Is there any events that you're working on for the India project that you have coming up where people can reach you for that particular area? Or
Yeah, so for India, it's definitely better to get in touch with me on LinkedIn, because there is a lot of information about the project. I'm currently working on building brand strategy for an open foundation. It is a nonprofit from Netherlands, so who is organizing the biggest conference on psychedelics in Europe and probably in the world. It's called ICPR. So you can find me there. It's happening between June 5th and 8th in Haarlem, Netherlands. Other than that, man, I'm just trying to make my blog work and get rid of my other work duties.
yeah,
I want to
I hear
talk
you.
about psychedelics and preach about the therapeutic potential. The third one, excited, or what was it different?
Yeah, what are you excited about?
Dude, I'm extremely excited by the therapeutic potential of psychedelics. I cannot. I mean, whenever I meet a person, I think like literally first or second phrase is just, "Have you heard that LSD can treat PTSD and depression?" My wife is pissed because I mean
Yeah,
she asks me not to talk about it because I talk too much about it at home. But yeah, that's the topic that fascinates me still, like every day for the duration of I don't know how many years. That's insane. I strongly believe that they have insane therapeutic potential, but of course, safety measures are required as always. But yeah,
fascinating. All right, well, hang
thanks.
on briefly afterwards. I'll talk to you just briefly afterwards. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Go down to the show notes, check out Vlad. He's got a lot of projects going on. He's really fun to talk to. Reach out to him if you're interested in anything he's doing. I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. And that's all we got for today. Aloha.
Thank you, brother.